Hi guys, how you doing? I decided to do an exercise video on the very basic home-based exercise called dead bugs. Mainly because, so when it comes to all exercises, hip thrusts, squats, deadlifts, lunges, especially split squats actually, split squats is a big one. Any exercise you can think of, to be honest. The main thing that you need to be aware of as you're performing the movements is that you're able to keep a nice neutral pelvic position and keep your abdominal muscles engaged so that you don't end up excessively arching at your lower back, which can, if it's excessive, can lead to lower back pain. Now, it doesn't happen with everyone, but I know there's definitely a few folk who have this sort of issue sometimes. Sometimes it can creep in when you get tired as well, just if you're in the middle of a squat in the reps and you're getting tired, the muscles are tired, and you start to lose the ability to maintain the correct form. But there's others that maybe just have to do a wee bit of extra work at home to really focus on engaging their lower abs properly. And it's all kind of connected to your pelvis. And this whole idea of keeping being able to move your pelvis from this position to that position, and then finding the sweet spot in the middle is really key to ensuring that you feel good when you train and that you're not getting wee niggly pains at your back. So I thought I'd just do this dead bug with the sort of basic version of it with a few progressions but not loads of progressions. I recommend you do that. If you're someone that gets a bit of back pain day to day or when you train, I'd really recommend you do this every day, maybe three to four sets, just for 5 minutes, to try and gain a better control over this movement. It won't just go away by itself, no matter how heavy. Well, if anything, if you go heavier you lift, then the more exacerbated it might become. But you can't really get rid of it unless you really focus on it. Now, it's multifactorial at times, so I'm not saying that this will fix everything, and if you've got back pain, this is the answer. It might be, but it might not be. It could be something else entirely, but for a lot of folk, just getting used to mastering a bit of pelvic control will go a long way to getting rid of any sort of discomfort you might be feeling when you're performing certain movements. So what we're looking for, this will give you a wee test right away to see if you're someone that needs to do this. And this is based on, there's been 2 people in the last 3 weeks that have come to me with this same issue in both cases. I think it's probably this exercise that you need to work on, and I'm sure there's others. So when you're lying down, right, I want you to lie down, right, like this, nice and relaxed. When you lie down, obviously, you're sort of just relaxed, your ribs come out a little bit. There's not a lot of engagement through the abdominal muscles. And now, to different degrees, when you put your hand underneath your back here, you might find that you've got quite a large gap to put your fingers and hand through. Okay, so for some people it will be more than others. The more excessive the gap is, the easier you find it to put your hand through here, then the more it's probably indicative of the fact that you probably need to focus on doing this exercise, essentially. Okay, because what we're looking for in stage 1 is, I want you to focus on tucking your pelvis that way, so that your lower back presses down into the floor. So if you tilt it like that, you'll notice, that's called a posterior pelvic tilt, you'll notice that when you do that, your lower back presses hard into the floor, and you should feel your stomach muscles suddenly becoming quite tense and working quite hard. And then if you relax, then the tension releases, the pelvis moves back a wee bit, and you feel that gap appear again. So engaging or creating a pelvic tilt using your abdominal muscles initially is as simple as that. Just push your lower back down into the floor. By pushing your lower back down into the floor, you're automatically forcing the muscles in your stomach to engage. Now, obviously, it's not as simple as this because this is an isolated movement. You're lying on your back, you're not thinking about your breathing, and you're not also moving up and down the way you would if you're doing like a hip thrust or a squat or a deadlift or a kettlebell swing. But this is a great start point just to become aware and to create awareness of these muscles and the fact that you're working them versus you're relaxed and you're not working. So next stage I would like you to do is, I want you to then focus on taking a big inhale of breath through your nose, and as you exhale, I want you to try and coincide it with the pelvis tilting again so the lower back presses into the floor. for some people, just quite simply breathing, exhaling out through the mouth will create the pelvic tilt without you having to consciously think about it. So for example, when you exhale, you might feel a bit of tension is created through the exhale, and that's just because your breathing is in your diaphragm and is all connected to your abdominal area. There's a connection between your breath and your ability to engage through the core and bring in the lower abs, so the breathing becomes quite important. So I want you to try that, just focus on maybe taking 5 breaths, like in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you do that, I want you to see if you can feel that your lower back is pressing down more forcefully into the ground in the exhale, and then it maybe relaxes a bit more on the inhale. Okay, so first of all, I like to call that a sort of pelvic breathing pattern, where you're really forcing or focusing on connecting a bit of muscle connection to your breath. So I would practice doing the breaths for that for 10. The next stage is what you could try is dig your heels into the ground like this and have your knees bent, okay? And then again, I want you to focus on tucking the pelvis, so pushing your lower back down so that your pelvis tucks under and your lower back presses down into the floor. Or it's almost like what came first, chicken and egg type scenario. Tuck your pelvis, posteriorly tilt it so that the lower back presses down into the floor. Now you might find your hamstrings switch on a little bit when you do that. You can put your feet flat to avoid that, and just tuck. Okay, but I want you to focus on tucking and then relaxing, and it's just to get you into this frame of mind of being aware of the difference between engaging and not engaging through that area. The next stage would be again to take an inhale breath and exhale, and as you exhale, again it's kind of hard to talk and breathe at the same time, but as you exhale, again you should feel more tension. So I would want you to do about 10 repetitions of inhale and exhale, okay? The next stage would be to take one foot off the ground, and as you take that foot off the ground, check what's happening at your lower back. Is there a gap appearing, and can you then create or reduce the gap? You could do it by consciously thinking about posteriorly tilting, there you go, there, and your lower back will press down. Or you could do 2 things, preferably at the same time. Inhale, exhale and posterior tilt. So one should, over time, the exhale should actually like create the tilt. It'll create a bit of a pelvic movement, but until you're ready for it, you need to sort of train it to become good at it, essentially. So that's why you need to do it every day. So you could just sort of switch legs like this, okay, and every time you switch legs, take an inhale, exhale. Okay, if the more used to it you get, I actually find it quite difficult to switch this area off when I'm doing this movement, because I'm so used to just keeping this in a sort of tense position when I'm lying here. So eventually you want to get to a point where you can lift the legs on and off, and the lower back will just still stay pressed down into the ground. The reason I'm asking you to keep one foot in the ground at the moment is, if you do this with both feet, okay, which is the next stage, initially you might feel that your hip flexor muscles take over, because these muscles in here are strong, and usually they can become quite dominant and take over the role that we're trying to get the lower abdominals to do. So if you're not used to engaging through the lower abs, there's a good chance that your hip flexors kick in really early, and you might therefore then find it harder to bring the lower abs in, because the hip flexors just want to dominate and get in the way. So that's why I'm suggesting that you might want to try with one in the ground initially, because you can create a bit more support and it's not as difficult to then call on the lower abs to come into play here, okay? So that would be, then the next stage would be to take both feet off the ground. When both feet are off the ground, it gets harder, and you might notice the lower gap in your back, the lower back gap here becomes greater and also harder to close, but that's what you have to do. Again, you can do it by using your breath, so you could, and you'll notice there on that exhale that my hips actually shifted, but my knees started to come up. I'll show you again. So I'm going to inhale. On the exhale, you'll notice that the hips literally tilt. So like that. That's the lower ab muscles pulling the pelvis forward or posteriorly, like so. Okay, so then when you relax, so there's clear movement there. between the inhale and the exhale, and that's, again, it's all because the diaphragm and your breathing is all connected to this area. So your job is to try and get better over the weeks at creating movement, using your breathing as well, so that every time you exhale, the lower back presses down into the floor because the pelvis is lifted thanks to the lower abs kicking in via the diaphragm and the breathing, okay? So it's important that you really get good at this. I can't emphasise it enough. If you're, you know, and that's a major part of like mastering pelvic hip stability, which will go a long way to like mastering all the other exercises as well. Because if you're struggling to get that movement, you struggle to engage the glutes as well when it comes to other the actual big movements like hip thrusts and stuff. Okay, the next stage in dead bugs would be to then slowly straighten one leg out. But with this in mind, you need to earn this movement, if that's the appropriate term. And what I mean by that is because the straighter this leg becomes, the more strain, because there's weight here in your leg, obviously, the more strain there is. It's almost like a crowbar prying down in your lower back, trying to pull it up and off the ground to create that space. And so it's harder to hold the space. So if you try and just immediately jump to this and do these and think, oh, I'm doing these, there's a good chance, I've seen it many people over the years, that you're performing the movement, but you're not actually like doing what it's for, which is the whole point of this movement isn't to like, I can't straighten my legs, sorry, because there's a woodway treadmill in front of me, right? And the whole point of this movement is to make sure that the longer this lever becomes, i.e. the harder you make this exercise, you're still able to maintain that lower back pelvic stability by keeping the lower back pressing to the ground. So see, straightening your leg is the equivalent of adding weight to the bar. So the longer these legs get, you make the straighter the leg is the equivalent of putting more weight on your squat bar or deadlift bar. And otherwise, you can't just jump on and throw weight on it and then go for it. You need to do it in a controlled manner, and you don't perform the next range of movement or the next weight until you've built up the strength. First of all, in a certain range and in a certain weight, and that's the same idea with dead bugs. That's why you need to start back where we started the video and then progress it on. So initially just spend about 5 or 10 minutes a day like doing variations of what I've just discussed in this video, and focus on your breathing and be aware. You have to consciously be aware of the lower back and what it's doing. A lot of the time I think people go through the motions with these sort of abdominal exercises and they just think if they're moving their knees in and out and doing all this with their chest or elbows towards their knees, that they're working the muscles. But you're not working on pelvic stability by doing this. Okay, you're not. It's just a waste. For a start, you're just forcing the abdominal muscles here to crunch, and yeah, you're going to be working these muscles, but there's no thought going into the control element of the pelvis, which is key, not just for lifting, by the way, running as well. So it's a really good exercise, but you need to prioritise it above all else. So if you're going out running 5 times a week and you get sore back, or you're going to spin classes 3 to 5 times a week and you get a sore back, then you need to sacrifice at least a couple of them and prioritise this. This is more important, and it will also have a positive effect on those other activities anyway. Okay, so I hope that helps. I know the video's going on a wee bit, but that's because it's important, and I thought it's worthwhile doing because there's a few people in the last few weeks. I thought 2 people, that's enough to do a video, right? Hope that helps. Any questions, just ask.